My wife framed my dad. One video later, cops arrested her instead. At 11:14 in the morning, my phone vibrated against the greasy laminate counter of a NAPA Auto Parts store. It was my wife, Sarah. For 3 excruciating seconds after I answered, all I heard was the ragged, gasping sound of someone hyperventilating. Then, a single, broken sob came through the speaker. "Marcus," she cried, her voice trembling so violently I could barely make out the words. "He pushed me. Oh God, Marcus, your dad pushed me down the stairs." My hand tightened around the heavy diesel fuel filter I was holding. The ambient noise of the store, the cashier typing on a keyboard, the radio playing softly in the background, faded into a dull hum. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. "I'm on the floor," she wept. My head is bleeding." I locked myself in the downstairs bathroom. "He's out there, Marcus. He's screaming." I dropped a $50 bill on the counter, didn't wait for the change, and sprinted to my pickup truck. I am an owner-operator. For the last 15 years, I've hauled freight across the country in a Peterbilt 389, spending 3 weeks on the road and 1 week at home. It's a grueling life, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it allowed me to hire in-home care for my 74-year-old father, Arthur. Dad was in the moderate stages of Alzheimer's. Most days, he was the same gentle, soft-spoken man who had taught me how to fish and how to change a tire. Some days he forgot the year, but he had never, not once in his entire life, been violent. I had parked my rig in the massive gravel driveway of our property in rural North Carolina just 2 hours earlier, exhausted after a run from Seattle. I had kissed Sarah, checked on Dad who was sleeping in his recliner, and immediately took my F-150 into town to grab parts for a quick engine repair. Sarah had always played the role of the devoted, suffering wife perfectly. She handled the doctors, the medications, and the daily frustrations of a declining parent. Or so I thought. The drive back to the house took 12 minutes. I took corners so fast the tires screamed, my heart hammering against my ribs. If my dad had truly become violent, it meant the end. The state would intervene. A doctor would sign the papers and Dad would be locked away in a memory care facility. A sterile, locked ward that would break his spirit in a month. When I turned onto my street, my stomach bottomed out. 2 squad cars and an ambulance were already parked at awkward angles across my lawn, their red and blue lights slicing through the overcast afternoon. I slammed my truck into park and left the door open, sprinting toward the front porch. "Sir, hold up!" a young police officer shouted, stepping into my path with a hand raised. "That's my house," I barked, trying to step around him. "That's my wife and my father." The officer's expression softened, but he didn't move. "Mr. Vance, your wife is being looked at by the EMTs inside. She's got a nasty laceration on her forehead and a sprained wrist. Your father is secure." Secure. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked past the officer's shoulder. There, sitting in the back of the second patrol car, was my dad. He looked impossibly small. He was wearing his favorite faded flannel shirt, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't handcuffed, but the heavy metal cage separating him from the front seat made him look like a prisoner. When he saw me, his eyes widened with absolute terror. He mouthed my name. I pushed past the officer and walked into my own living room. Sarah was sitting on the edge of the sofa, an EMT dabbing a gauze pad against a cut near her hairline. She looked up at me, her eyes bloodshot and brimming with tears. She reached out her good hand. "Marcus, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I tried to calm him down. I really did. I just asked him what he was looking for in his old desk, and he snapped. He looked right through me and shoved me backward down the foyer stairs. An older sergeant, his nameplate reading Miller, was taking notes on a small pad. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "Mr. Vance, I know this is hard, but unfortunately, it's a call we get a lot. When the dementia progresses, the aggression comes with it. Your wife is lucky she didn't break her neck. We've contacted Adult Protective Services. Under the circumstances, we have to put a 72-hour psychiatric hold on him. He can't stay here." "No," I said, my voice eerily calm. "My dad doesn't have an aggressive bone in his body. He gets confused, yes, but he doesn't hurt people." Sarah let out a sharp, tragic sob. "You aren't here, Marcus. You're out on the highway. You don't see what I deal with every single day. He thought I was an intruder. I can't do this anymore. We have to sell this house and use the money to put him in Oak Creek. It's the only way to keep everyone safe." Oak Creek, the most expensive facility in the county. Sarah had been subtly pushing to sell Dad's house. a beautiful piece of property he owned outright and had transferred to my name, for over a year. She always said it was too big, too much upkeep. Now she had the perfect excuse. The state would force my hand. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls of the house I grew up in suddenly felt like a trap. I told the sergeant I needed a minute to collect myself and walked out the front door. The cool autumn air hit my face, but it didn't help. I walked past the ambulance and stopped dead in my tracks. My Peterbilt 389 was parked exactly where I left it, its massive chrome grille facing the house. And sitting right in the center of the windshield, tucked just under the sun visor, was my Blackview 4K dual-channel dashcam. Trucking is a liability nightmare. If someone brake checks you and you crush their sedan, you are guilty until proven innocent. That's why 3 months ago, I dropped $1,200 on a hardwired, cloud-connected dashcam system. It ran off an auxiliary battery. As long as the truck was parked, the camera stayed in parking mode, continuously recording a 160-degree wide-angle view of anything that moved in front of the rig. The entire front porch, the foyer stairs visible through the glass front door, and the driveway were perfectly in frame. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from a sudden, sharp surge of adrenaline. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the dashcam app, and connected to the camera's Wi-Fi. I scrubbed the timeline back an hour and a half. I watched myself pull out of the driveway in the F-150. 10 minutes later, the timeline showed a spike in motion. I hit play. On my phone screen, a dark blue BMW sedan pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out. I recognized him instantly. It was David, the real estate agent Sarah claimed she had hired just to evaluate our property taxes. He walked up to the front door, didn't knock, and just walked in. I scrubbed forward. 15 minutes later, the front door opened again. Sarah and David walked out onto the porch. They were carrying 2 heavy cardboard boxes. The camera resolution was sharp enough that I could see what was inside. My father's antique coin collection, his silver pocket watches, and a stack of manila folders that looked exactly like the property deeds and banking information kept in his locked study. David loaded the boxes into the trunk of the BMW. He walked back to Sarah, pulled her in by the waist, and kissed her deeply. She wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing. I stopped breathing. The betrayal felt like a physical blow, a heavy wrench taken straight to my ribs. But the worst was yet to come. I kept watching. 5 minutes later, the front door swung open. It was Dad. He stepped onto the porch in his socks, looking disoriented, pointing at the BMW. Even without audio, I could tell he was asking what they were doing with his things. David stepped forward, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. He shoved my father hard. Dad stumbled backward, hitting the porch railing, looking terrified. Sarah didn't help him. Instead, she grabbed David by the arm and pointed furiously toward the road. David sprinted to his car and sped off. Sarah watched him leave, then turned back to my father. She pointed a finger in his face, yelling something. Dad retreated into the house. Then, my wife, the woman I had loved and provided for, the woman currently crying about a concussion inside my living room, walked over to the heavy oak pillar of the front porch. She braced herself, took a deep breath, and deliberately slammed the side of her own head against the solid wood. She fell to her knees. She grabbed a rock from the landscaping, scraped it against her forehead to draw blood, and then casually walked back inside. 3 minutes later, the police arrived. I stared at the glowing screen for almost a full minute. Every instinct I had as a man screamed at me to march into that house and tear the walls down. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter things. But 20 years of handling 80,000 pounds of steel on black ice teaches you one thing. Panic gets you killed. Anger makes you sloppy. You fight chaos with absolute, freezing precision. I downloaded the video directly to my phone's local storage. I backed it up to the cloud. Then, I walked slowly back into the house. Sergeant Miller was packing up his notepad. "All right, Mr. Vance. The EMTs are going to transport your wife to the hospital for a precautionary scan. The transport van is on its way for your father. I need you to sign this incident report." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes pleading, playing the victim with Oscar-worthy perfection. "It'll be okay, Marcus. We'll get through this. It's for his own good." I ignored her. I walked straight up to Sergeant Miller and held out my phone. "Sergeant, before I sign anything, I need you to watch this video, from beginning to end." Miller frowned, looking from me to the phone. "What is this?" "My truck out there is equipped with a 24-hour surveillance dashcam," I said, my voice deadpan and loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "It faces the front of the house. It caught the entire assault. The color drained from Sarah's face. The ice pack slipped from her hand and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she stammered. "Just watch it, Sergeant," I insisted. Miller took the phone. The EMT, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, stepped back. For 3 excruciating minutes, the only sound in the house was the heavy breathing of the police officer as his eyes darted across the small screen. I watched his jaw tighten. I watched his posture shift from relaxed sympathy to rigid authority. When the video ended, Miller didn't say a word to me. He slowly handed the phone back. He turned his head and looked at Sarah. The sympathetic grandfather act was completely gone, replaced by the cold, calculating stare of a veteran cop who realized he had almost been played. "Officer Davies," Miller barked toward the front door. The young cop who had stopped me earlier rushed in. "Get the old man out of the cruiser. Bring him inside. Now." "Wait, what's going on?" Sarah shrieked, standing up. "He pushed me. You saw my head." "Ma'am, sit down," Miller commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "Do not take another step toward the door." He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need to amend the nature of this call. Cancel the psych hold. Send an investigator, and run a plate for a dark blue BMW registered to a David." He looked at me. "I have his license plate number on the 4K footage," I said calmly. "And his name." Sarah panicked. She lunged for her purse on the kitchen counter, but Miller was faster. He grabbed her by the wrist, the supposedly sprained one, and spun her around, forcing her against the wall. "Sarah Vance, you are under arrest for filing a false police report, elder abuse, and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. If I were you, I'd start using it right now." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, she started screaming. Not the fake, hyperventilating cries from the phone call, but raw, ugly screams of a trapped animal. She cursed me, she cursed my father, she cursed the truck. I didn't blink. I just watched them walk her out the front door, right past the Peterbilt that had just saved my family. A moment later, Officer Davies brought my dad inside. The old man looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped. When he saw me, he reached out with trembling hands. "Marcus? Did I do something wrong?" The men in uniform, they were angry. I walked over, wrapped my arms around him, and pulled him into a tight embrace. I buried my face in his shoulder, smelling the familiar scent of Old Spice and sawdust. The tears I had been holding back finally broke, hot and heavy against my cheeks. "No, Dad," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're safe. You're home. Nobody is taking you anywhere." The legal fallout was swift and brutal. The video evidence was insurmountable. Sarah's lover, David, was arrested 2 days later trying to pawn Dad's coin collection. The authorities uncovered a massive paper trail, forged signatures, secret bank accounts, and a plan to liquidate Dad's estate the moment he was declared mentally incompetent. Sarah was sentenced to 4 years in a state penitentiary. David got 3. I filed for divorce the day after her arrest, taking everything, leaving her with nothing but the orange jumpsuit on her back. I sold the Peterbilt 3 months later. It broke my heart to give up the highway, but some things are more important than diesel and asphalt. I took a local job driving a dump truck for a construction company in town. It pays less, and the hours are early, but every evening at 5 p.m., I pull into my own driveway. I walk through my own front door, and I eat dinner with my father. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and Dad is asleep, I sit on the front porch and look out at the empty space where my big rig used to park. People tell me I got lucky. They say if I had parked facing the street, or if the battery had died, I would have lost everything. But I don't believe in luck anymore. I believe in truth. I believe that no matter how deep you bury a lie, no matter how perfectly you frame the narrative, the truth is always there, waiting in the background, ready to pull you into the light.